This is your May 2024 Astrology Forecast. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Laura Chung. It's nice to have you here. And just as a disclaimer, I am biased. I come from a decolonial and anti oppression lens. So the things that I will be stating here are based on my own research. And of that perspective, I'm not neutral. I'm not both sides. I definitely come at astrology and through life from the lens of anti-oppression and decolonization work. So, just as a disclaimer, if you don't like that, or if you don't agree with me, this might not be for you. But for everybody else, welcome back. It's been quite the month. We always begin each episode by reviewing what happened the month before because astrology is the study of time, cycles, history. We can't really understand what to expect in the future if we're not understanding what happened in the past. And really, what I recommend for people is to take out your calendar. I have mine right here, and write down some notes and circle some dates. I also like to journal every day with the transits and write down, even if it seems insignificant, like I saw three crows today flying in the air. What does that mean? To write it down because you just never know. I'm a huge believer in omens, signs, and synchronicities. So I'll oftentimes go back and I'll read what happened that day. And it might have just been a little clue as to something that makes sense later on, especially when there's so much happening, like what happened in April. So much happened in April. And I find it to be very useful to look back at the transits that happened so that you can integrate the lessons of the transits. I don't believe that the planets and the cosmos are punishing us. I believe we have free will, and the cosmos, as above, so below, as below, so above, and what we make meaning out of it helps us to become the people that we were destined to be. I don't believe in good or bad. I believe in light and dark, and that we are made of both, and we cannot have the light without the dark. So that is my little disclaimer here. So a lot happened in April. I'm just going to do a review. Hopefully, it won't take longer than 30 minutes because a lot happened. And I also kept track of a lot of the things that happened just because I wanted to make sure that I remembered everything. But right off the bat, April 1st, Mercury stationed retrograde. And some of these dates aren't exact because sometimes the transit needs to perfect or it needs to start separating in order for you to see like the sign or the manifestation of the energy. So the first thing that I noticed was that Israel bombed an Iran embassy in Syria, and that happened around when Mercury stationed to go retrograde. And why that's significant is because it was in the sign of Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars, the god of war, and also Mars in Babylonian astrology in ancient Mesopotamia was the god of the underworld. And so people died at the embassy. And then later on, around 2 weeks later, April 13th, Iran retaliated by directly targeting Israel. So the reason why I'm also bringing up a lot about Gaza and Israel is because on October 14th, the total solar eclipse that happened in the sign of Libra was really what started the ongoing genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. And it's just a continuation of that story because Israel has a Libra rising chart, and I believe the exact ascendant degree is like 23 degrees. And that eclipse happened at 22. So these stories are going to continue with these Aries and Libra eclipses. And we just had two of them in March and April. So then on April 5th, here in New York, we had an earthquake. It was a 4.8 earthquake. And again, I'm really into numerology, and I thought that was significant. One, because we don't really have earthquakes here, it's not common. And second, it was the same numbers that were the upcoming total solar eclipse in the sign of Aries on April 4th. So 4-8. Okay. I just thought that was like way too wild. A couple days before the earthquake in New York, there was a thunderstorm, and there's photos out there of a lightning strike on the Statue of Liberty. Now, I find that to be very symbolic because all month we were leading up to this Jupiter Uranus conjunction in the sign of Taurus, and Uranus is the sign of um, like awakening and revolution. And Uranus is the sky god in Greek mythology and also talks about electricity. So I just thought that was very symbolic. And the fact that it was the Statue of Liberty, which is a symbol of freedom. And please, like, if you have any things that you saw or that stood out to you, please DM Awaken and Align on Instagram or email us, because these are just the things that I noticed. But there are so many things that happened in the month of April. So then on April 8th, there was a total solar eclipse in the sign of Aries with Chiron there at 19 degrees. And this, like I mentioned, tied in with the eclipse stories of Libra and Aries that have been going on all throughout 2023. And I personally went to Rochester, New York in the Path of Totality with my astrologer friend, Tasha Begg, who I've had on this podcast. And it was the first time for both of us to go to an eclipse event. And well, first of all, it was cloudy, so we didn't actually get to see the moon covering the sun. But what was so amazing about this experience was that it got completely dark outside for like 2 minutes straight. And that is something that I've never personally experienced before. And it was so spiritual, and there was something very universally primal and just spiritual about the whole experience. So I recommend the next eclipse, if you can travel to it, a solar eclipse, to do it, because it's an experience that I'll never forget. And we went to the Rochester Planetarium, and so it wasn't like a spiritual event, but it felt very spiritual being there outside with all these different people watching something so universally connective like the moon and the sun, and it just going completely dark for 2 minutes. My entire body was like electrified, and I had like an electricity running down my spine. It's really hard for me to describe and really like put into words how I felt, but I just felt awakened by that experience. And also, like, we're so small in this entire universe, and there's just so much beauty and magic that happens that it's just, I don't know, it just made me feel very small, but also like big at the same time in on the earth and in this whole universal experience of being a human here on earth in this timeline. So I highly recommend this kind of event. People were asking me, you know, in ancient cultures and civilizations, people say like, don't go outside. And to a certain degree, there are definitely cultures that believe that. But I mean, at that time, they didn't have the kind of awareness that we have now in certain aspects, right? And so they would notice that when eclipses happen, that huge things, events, big events would happen around the eclipses. And to a certain degree, they might have seen that as maybe a bad omen. I don't know. I know in my culture, Korean culture, they definitely did not see solar eclipses to be favorable, but I wasn't afraid. I just decided this is something that I wanted to experience. And if if it, obviously I protected my crown, I did a prayer, I wore a lot of obsidian, like I did my stuff, but I just wasn't afraid. I was ready for whatever download that I was ready to receive at that time. And I did. And I'm still continuing to integrate everything. I'm still like integrating April basically, and it's the end of April. And I think that's what May is going to be all about, but we'll get there in a second. So let me know how your eclipse story was because mine was great. And also, I have Aries and Libra placements. And so this solar eclipse was hitting my personal planets and my personal natal chart. So April 9th, in and around April 9th, Arizona enforced a 1864 statehood near total abortion ban, which in 1864, slavery was still a thing. So this is a very like archaic, um, just like what Arizona? Come on. But I thought that was interesting for a later point that I'll make. On April 10th, Mars and Saturn at 14 degrees of Pisces were conjunct. And that was the big Mars and Saturn conjunction of April. So in April, there were like a lot of events, right? We had Mercury retrograde, we had the total solar eclipse, we had the Mars Saturn conjunction in Pisces, we had the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus on April 20th. There was just like a lot of things going on. And this one had the themes of water constriction. Like, for example, in Gaza, there's a forced starvation, there is a siege, and so there is no water, clean water for the Palestinian people in Gaza to drink. And and then I saw people posting that Flint, Michigan has been without clean water since April 24th, 2024. That's been 10 years. And then on April 16th, Dubai was flooded, which was, kind of shocking to see because Dubai is in the middle of the desert and they don't really experience flooding like that. So these themes of like water came up a lot during the Mars and Saturn conjunction in Pisces. But for you, wherever you have wherever you have Pisces in your chart, you started a 2-year cycle in your Pisces house. So what I also found interesting about April was there was a lot of ending of cycles because conjunctions are like a new moon, right? When two planets come together, you start a new cycle. So there were a lot of cycles that were ending and then simultaneously beginning. On April 17th, the student encampments started, the first one being at Columbia University. And if you want to understand why the students are protesting, you can look up Columbia University Apartheid Divestment.org, I believe. They have 5 demands. Basically, they want the university to divest from the genocide of Israel. And it's crazy to even it's crazy that universities are even tied to a government like Israel, right? Like you just wouldn't think that, but that's the truth of the United States. And these students pay like if a student lives on campus, $88,000 a year in tuition. So they have the right to know where their funds are going and how their tuition money is being used. But there's 5 demands that they want that they're demanding Columbia University to divest from. And that started at Columbia University. And then the university president called the NYPD on them. And that just kind of sparked this huge nationwide student protest. What was interesting about like doing a little bit of research around this is that There was another Jupiter-Uranus conjunction between 1968 and 1969 where students were protesting the Vietnam War. And I do believe Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyches, he talks a lot about Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions being about protesting and rebellion and revolution, because Jupiter is the planet of expansion. It expands everything it touches, but it's also the planet about higher learning and higher education and spirituality. And Uranus is the planet of awakening and revolution and rebellion. And so when those two come together in any sign, it does speak about some kind of revolution and rebellion. The last time Jupiter and Uranus in the sign of Taurus came together in the sky was 1941, which is right before the US entered World War II. Pearl Harbor happened December 7th, 1941, I believe. And then the US entered World War II. So that was the last time that Jupiter and Uranus were in the sign of Taurus, which is why astrologers are very concerned about this particular conjunction, because we don't want to be going into any other war, even though the United States, that's how they make their money. They are the military industrial complex. But like average US citizens don't want to go into a war. Like, we don't want that kind of stuff. So I just thought the student encampments were really like significant in the upcoming Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus, because Taurus is also about like staying still. Like, it's a fixed earth sign, so it's about using your body to be like still on earth. So if you think about what the students are doing, they're literally using their bodies and camping on campus lawns. And the specific area that the Columbia students decided to use was designated for protesting. So I just thought that was such a Taurus thing. It's like, I'm going to use my body and I'm going to sit here until the university divests. Around the same time, though, which was a distraction in Western media, there were mass graves found at Nasser and Al Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Like 300 or 400 bodies were found. Now, when I did more research into this, the Palestinian people put the people who were dying and executed and murdered in temporary graves because they didn't have obviously time and space to bury their loved ones in a honorable way. So they put them in these temporary graves. But then when the Israelis, the IDF or IOF came, they dug up the grave. Okay, this story gets really weird, so trigger warning if you don't want to hear this kind of creepy shit. The Israelis, the Israeli army came, they dug up the graves, they took some of the bodies, like skin and organs. Okay, if you don't know about this, just Google like skin harvesting and organ harvesting. Um, and then they like reburied these bodies. It's just very disturbing. So they basically dug up the graves, they took their skin, they took their organs, and they reburied them. Now, this reminded me also of the mass graves that they found at that Alabama or Mississippi jail, like right before October happened. And then it's also reminding me of the mass graves in Canada where they found the boarding schools of Indigenous children. And this also reminded me of the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus, because again, like, there's no such thing as good or bad in astrology. Like, just because Jupiter is involved doesn't mean everything is going to be, and I think I mentioned this last month, like, not everything is going to be yay, opportunity and luck, Jupiter expands everything. So the fact that they found these mass graves, and I'm just thinking again, Taurus with embodiment and bodies in the ground, fixed earth, this like surprising Uranus discovery of all these mass graves. That's also what came to mind during this Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And actually, these student protests, the way that Western media constantly kept reporting on the protests was distracting from the fact that they had found these mass graves. And I think only CNN was the only Western media outlet that was reporting on these mass graves, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that just was very disturbing to read. And I was telling my sister, like, there's just some things in life that you just wish you didn't know humans were capable of. Like, and this is one of them. Like, I just didn't think that people could even think this stuff up, you know, like I just don't have any words of like how people think of this stuff. Now what they do with that skin and those organs, you're just going to have to Google that and find out for yourself, because that's even more disturbing, and I won't bring that up here. Ay, ay, ay. So, on April 19th, Taylor Swift released her Tortured Poets Department album, and she has a song on there that I was just like shocked. Okay. And Swifties don't come after me, because I do like Taylor Swift songs. I just don't like Taylor Swift as a like model for white feminism. I personally don't think she gives a shit about like women of the global majority. I think she's capitalistic, and I think she uses her privilege to only speak on issues that directly impact her. That is literally the definition of white feminism. But I like her songs. This album, though, I don't know what happened here, because from her song, quote, I Hate It Here, there's a line that says, I'd say the 1830s, except without the racist. Now, this goes back to that April 9th, Arizona enforced a 1864 statehood near total abortion ban. Like Taylor Swift, hello, like 1830, they were still slaves. They were still enslaved people. Like this lyric from her song was just so tone deaf, and there's racism still today. So I just thought that was like really weird. Like, and I just thought it was such a juxtaposition. The reason why I brought up her, um, the reason why I brought up her album, was to juxtapose like her Tortured Poets Department album and what she cares about and what she like grieves, and all of her sadness around like, or sadness, or you know, the torturedness of her like um existence here on this planet, which we all have the right to be. You know, we all have grievances, we all have things that we grieve and that we're sad about. But it was just such a stark juxtaposition of like the things that she was saying in her album versus what's happening to women in Gaza, in the Congo, in the Sudan. Like, I just was like, if there was ever an album to amplify white feminism, this is it. So I just thought that was interesting also, that it came out on April 19th ish, which was like the day before the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And I personally believe Taylor Swift uses an astrologer. I think she's very witchy. I think she knows like the best transits for her songs to go viral. So I also didn't think that was an accident. Okay, so on April 20th, which was the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, the House passed a $95 billion aid package to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And on the same day, TikTok was banned. So I do find that to be interesting on the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. Like I mentioned, Jupiter expands things. It doesn't always mean opportunity, unluck. and luck. I guess it really depends on like what side you're on, but Taurus represents money, it represents resources, and I just thought $95 billion just seemed very, very extravagant to be sending other people around the world money besides the US citizens. So tax day in the US is April 15th. So that was like less than a week. US Americans sent their tax money to the US government. And in less than a week, they knew exactly how to spend our money and where to send it. So you cannot believe their lies when they say there's not enough money, because $95 billion is a lot of money. That's our money. And that it's going to take a lot of time, because they figured that out in like less than a week, where to give all of our money. And by the way, when people tell me that I'm obsessed, people are like, why are you so obsessed? I'm obsessed because we're in late stage capitalism here. We all have to work to exist. We have to work just to exist here. Okay. I bet you today is like 85 degrees on I'm recording this on Monday, April 29th. If there was no such thing as capitalism, I bet you none of you would be working right now. You would all want to go to the beach. You would all want to enjoy your life. We all have to work to exist here. And our hard-earned dollars are going to everywhere but here. Like, we can't even get universal health care. We can't even solve our own houseless crisis, our homeless crisis. We can't even, and it can literally, the houseless crisis can be like literally solved with $20 billion, and we can all have our student loan debt paid off, and we can have universal health care. We can all have that, clearly. $95 billion. And the Israeli citizens, do you know how far Israel is? It's far. It's like not anywhere near the US, but it acts like a 51st state because they have healthcare. They have free education because of our tax dollars. Our tax dollars subsidize their healthcare. Anyway, I'm going off on this rant and tangent because people are like, why are you so obsessed? And I'm like, I'm angry. I'm so angry every single day that this is happening, and that I'm trying to make up for lost time for not knowing for this long that this was happening. Like, my literal another spiritual awakening happened in October during that October 14th eclipse. And I was like, hello, we've been lied to, we've been programmed, we have been brainwashed to think that Arab people are terrorists. Meanwhile, the US is literally the terrorists here. Anyway, I'm going off on a rant and tangent, but when I saw that $95 billion aid package, I was like, are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Seriously? Like, it's just so upsetting. It should make you upset too. It should. Because you could have a really nice life, no student debt, you could afford your groceries, you can have more than 2 weeks of vacation, you can have everything that you need to have a nice life. Instead, this is where our money goes. It's to bombing innocent people. Okay, so April 25th, Mercury stationed to go direct at 15 degrees, which was conjunct the North Node. And remember back on March 18th, that was the pre-shadow. Okay. And normally during the pre-shadow is when the actual like Mercury communications things goes awry. And then during the actual retrograde is when you like review. And then when it goes post shadow is when you like take action on the things that you've reviewed, which is where we are now. And I just think it's very like interesting that it was not only that right now when it went direct, it was conjunct the North Node. So it's like some fated messages, some like messages that are connected to your destiny could have come up. You might have had like a download or something. Um, and then finally, I just wanted to talk about Uranus because Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus since May 2018. So Uranus has been trying to break apart your Taurus house or awaken something or help you to break free of something. And it's going to enter Gemini in April of 2026. So we still have like 2 years ish left of this Uranus in Taurus transit. So that's the review of April. Just like an overall broad picture of May, Jupiter will go into Gemini on May 25th for 1 year. So Jupiter is kind of finishing up its, I guess, like journey through your Taurus house. So if you are a Taurus or if you Taurus placements, your big three, or if you have a stellium, or if you're a fixed sign person, sun, moon, and rising, Jupiter has been trying to expand an area of your life. Specifically your Taurus house. It's been trying to bring you luck there, bring you opportunity. Maybe you were learning something about anything involved with Taurus topics. Like I know a lot of people got into herbology, herbalism, learning about plants, learning about agriculture, and like literally growing your own food. A lot of people started working on their money mindset, the prosperity mindset, healing their scarcity mindset and poverty consciousness. A lot of people started to become more aware of like their embodiment and somatic practices. I'm just thinking about like Taurus topics. And now Jupiter is finishing up that story and it's going to move into Gemini for a year, starting on May 25th. And so we're currently in Taurus season, so that's a fixed Earth sign ruled by Venus, and we're gonna move into Gemini season for the month of May, which is a mutable air sign. And going from Taurus, which is all about embodiment and being in our body and creating foundations and growing something, then we're going to get into a very busy season, especially with Jupiter there. Things are going to feel like they're going to move very quickly. It's a very social season. It's the beginning of the summer here in the northern hemisphere. So like if we're going to look at big picture for May, it really is all about integrating the lessons from April, integrating your Mercury retrograde story, your eclipse story, paying attention to any ideas that are forming from the Jupiter and Uranus conjunction, because again, that's a start of a 14-year cycle. And really it's about just grounding. I mean, how many things happen in April, you know? Because once we get to Gemini season, it's going to be very busy. And again, like um, a lot of just busy energy for your nervous system. So that is the big picture for May. And I guess let's just begin with May here. By the way, Stephanie had her baby. She had a healthy baby girl named Sloan, and she is doing really well. Just on a personal note for me, I literally so Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus is happening. It happened in my sixth house of work. Um, well, the sixth house means more than work, but it just became very prevalent that this story was going to be about my work and how it's changing so quickly. So back in October, so before October, if you had just started listening to me or you just started following me October on, prior to October, I thought my life was going a specific direction. I am an astrologer. I have my master's in psychology. I wrote a book about how to manifest from a very decolonial anti-oppression lens. And I thought my life was going in a specific direction. And I had this astrology podcast with my co-host Stephanie Campos called The Millennial Mystics. And everything has changed in the last 7 months. I started working with the Slow Factory part-time, which is gonna, it seems like, go a little bit more than that, working on their content, working on their TikTok. And I started writing my second book, fingers crossed. It's a totally different book than the book that I wrote, How to Manifest. Um, it's so different. It's like a different genre. And I started writing more. You can read my latest offering on the Slow Journal at the Slow Factory website about the full moon in Scorpio, which was also another big deal. I felt like that kind of was like overshadowed by a lot of the other conjunctions that happened in April. But for me personally, again, that was hitting my personal placements. It was such a big deal for me. And I'm going through a lot of midlife transits right now that are redirecting me in a certain life path. And I just didn't have a lot of clarity because I wasn't able to fully like sit down and ask myself, like, what the heck happened ever since October, which that solar eclipse was, it was literally pinging all of my, I have a Libra stellium. Um, and I just felt this calling to start speaking out about Palestine, but not, it's not just about Palestine. Like, Palestine was just like the catalyst for me to really understand like my place in the bigger collective liberation story. And it unfolded a lot of different layers for me and my own identity as a US citizen born on this land, but coming from an ancestral land that has also been colonized by the US and Japan. And it just like, it shifted my mindset and perspective in so many different ways. And also like, I've just been going on kind of like fight or flight mode to fill a gap that Western media wasn't filling, which was to bring awareness to these issues that are very important for our like elevation of collective consciousness. And so I felt like, oh my God, it was an awakening for me because I realized my deeper calling is to um, be a communicator, a storyteller, amplifying voices that are being silenced, but also sharing ancestral wisdom from our ancestors that have been colonized and our stories have been buried. And all of these things have come together in such a short amount of time that I I literally was like, what am I doing now? Am I still an astrologer? Am I still a healer? Am I still doing Reiki? Am I still like, because so much of what I focus on now is doing research and doing TikToks for the Soul Factory and really talking about anti-imperialism, US imperialism and collective liberation. And and I still don't really have it figured out. Like, again, I'm going to take April. I mean, I'm going to say my mind is still in April. I'm going to take May to sit with like everything that has happened in the last 7 months and integrate everything, because I still don't fully, I still haven't caught up with myself. But um I think I, you know, everything is just going to be integrated as it always is. My work is always going to be spiritual because I can't do this work without being spiritual. My work is always going to include astrology because it's so interesting because psychology, astrology, and the work that I do researching is they're all similar because I research history, I study the patterns and cycles of time, and they're all related to humanities. They're all related to our consciousness, right? So, just on a personal level, I haven't been interviewing people for the last couple months because I was just trying to figure out like, what am I doing next? What do I want to do next? Who do I want to become next? But at the same time, like I'm still super passionate about bringing this offering, the monthly horoscopes, the monthly forecast, because I do believe one of my strengths is to help people know who they are, their gifts, their talents, and have a revolution inside first so that you can bring your skills and talents to the collective liberation. And something that I've been thinking about recently is if there was no colonization, if there was no capitalism, if there was no oppression, like what would I do with my time? And I honestly don't know the answer to that because I look at my chart and I'm like, gosh, this whole chart is just about awakening and being a disruptor and helping other people realize that they have all the gifts and talents within themselves. So maybe like for now, that's just my job. And the future that I'm fighting for is not something that I'm even going to see in my lifetime. And I'm okay with that. Um, but those are just some things that I've been thinking about recently. And just a personal update. Like, I also am ending major cycles and beginnings, and I'm still figuring it out. But when I do, I will definitely update all of you. Um, because I'm also still figuring it out myself. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into May because May is such a sweet month. I think this is, again, a great month to integrate everything. So I'm recording this, like I mentioned, on Monday, April 29th, and Venus ingresses into the sign of Taurus, which Venus is in domicile in Taurus. And then on April 30th, Mars will ingress into Aries. So, what I love about this month is that Venus and Mars will both be in their home signs. So, when I like to think about planets in their domicile or planets in their home sign, is that they're very well resourced. They have all the resources that they need. That's like if I'm in my own home, I know where everything is. I know where the food is. I feel very comfortable in my home. I can, like, I don't have to ask for permission. That's how I like to see planets in domicile. If planets are in detriment or they're fallen, it doesn't mean that they're like messed up. They just are resourced in a different way. And I have a lot of those planets, by the way. Okay, so which will bring us to May 1st. Venus at 2 degrees of Taurus will square Pluto at 2 degrees of Aquarius. Now, if you think back to February 17th, when they were conjunct at 0 degrees of Aquarius, this is the opening square. So Venus square Pluto is, well, on the one hand, it could be a very sexy transit, very passionate, very magnetic, very sensual. On the other part of it, it can also be um power dynamics, on unequal power dynamics. And actually, when I think about Venus in Taurus square Pluto in Aquarius, I think about the 4B movement in South Korea. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but basically it was a couple of years ago. The women in South Korea decided that they were just going to quit the patriarchy. And the 4B movement stands for, um, and I forget the Korean words, but they all start with the letter B, which is why it's called the 4B. They're basically boycotting dating men, sleeping with men, marrying men, having children. So this Venus square Pluto is kind of reminding me of that. Like, Venus in its home sign of Taurus is literally like your body. And then square to Pluto in Aquarius is like a social movement. Like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to entertain men anymore. And it's gotten so bad that the birth rate in South Korea has gone down to the point where the government has said, like, hey, we'll give you money if you have babies, and not actually deal with the patriarchy problem, because why would they? But that's just one aspect, that's just one um manifestation of this aspect that I thought of. But in your own personal life, look at where you have Taurus and Pluto, I mean Taurus and Aquarius, and these are going to be um having a conversation as planets start to ingress into Taurus. So the next day on May 2nd, Pluto will go retrograde. And for the rest of this year, Pluto will be retrograde and dipping back into Capricorn for its final stay at the anaretic degree of 29 degrees of Capricorn. So we're not out of the woods yet. Until Pluto will be in Aquarius like forever for 20 years in, I think, January of 2025. Okay, so on May 7th, we have a cute little new moon at 18 Taurus. And I actually want to show you the chart because I think it's a good opportunity to just, look at the chart. Here we are at 18 degrees. As you can see, the moon and the sun are together in the sign of Taurus. And the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. So this is always, the Taurus new moons are always great for setting intentions for something that you want to grow. So when planets are in domicile, they're at home, but then we also have exaltations where they're treated like royalty. Like, let's say I'm going to a friend's house who puts out like the best sheets for me, puts out really beautiful flowers, and cooks dinner. It's like you're treated really, really well. So again, really well resourced. And the ruler of the new moon here is Venus, which is also in Taurus. It's a little wide of an orb, but it's still there, co-present. I like to use like a 6-degree orb, but it's still there. Venus is still there in Taurus in domicile. So we have here a Taurus stellium. We have Jupiter, Uranus, the moon, the sun, and Venus all here. So your Taurus house is being lit up, it's being activated. Something new is starting here. You can set an intention. And it's going to have a lot of power because you have two benefics here. Benefics in astrology are Jupiter and Venus. And I think this is really beautiful. I think this is a beautiful new moon. I think it's a beautiful day to like I think in the Taurus new moon last year, I planted seeds and I set intentions with the seeds, and that flower actually grew. I mean, it took a little bit of time because they were seeds, but I just love the metaphor of planting something and with your intention and allowing something to grow. What I also love about this new moon is that the new moon is sextile to Saturn in Pisces here at 17 degrees. So sextiles are the aspect of Venus. So it's like a flowing aspect. And yeah, I just really love this. Just really love this. I love this new moon here. Let me see if there's anything else that I wrote down. No, beautiful new moon. Love it. I think you're all gonna really like May, especially after the April that we've had. Okay, so moving right along, on May 13th, the sun in Taurus will be conjunct Uranus in Taurus at 23 degrees. So this is the first of 3 personal planet conjunctions to Uranus. So the sun in Taurus, conjunct Uranus and Taurus in 23 degrees. Again, conjunctions are like new moons. They begin a new cycle. And what I find interesting about May 13th is there's other things happening. Second, Mercury is out of its post shadow. So Mercury will finally be out of the retrograde degrees and moving into new ground. So if there was like any uncertainty or any doubt, everything's going to become very clear after May 13th. And then also Venus in Taurus will sextile Saturn in Pisces. And again, Venus and Saturn are beautiful. Um, it's a beautiful combination, sextiles, in something being working very harmoniously with each other. So I think this is a really great day. I think May 13th, you want to circle that with three of these things happening at the same time. You get some kind of clarity in something that you weren't very sure of it prior to May 13th. And for me personally, I do believe this has a lot to do with, like I mentioned, my like work career, because Taurus is just my sixth house of work. So just think to like, what were some things you were thinking about during the Mercury retrograde in Aries and your Taurus house? Things are going to become more clear. On May 15th, Mercury will ingress into the sign of Taurus. So again, like not only will Mercury be out of its shadow, but it's moving into a completely different sign. And Mercury, and Stephanie Campos said this, Mercury and Earth signs don't really say a lot. They just don't say a lot. And it's more about doing and more about action versus like the communication isn't verbal. It's just like, okay, I know what I need to do now, and I'm gonna like make it happen in a very earthly embodied way. Something that I was thinking about Taurus too. So I don't have many earth placements. I have my Chiron in Taurus is that sometimes, and I also got this download from watching the encampments. Like sometimes you just need to do in order to believe. So in like manifestation theory, I've even said this many times, you have to believe it to see it, but sometimes we need to see it to believe it. And I think um seeing all the student protests throughout the United States, like just seeing like the sheer number of students risking their academic careers for um the freedom of Palestinians, but also like our own freedom here in the US, like seeing that visually, like reignited the like the movement, the whatever, the intifada, the revolution, the rebellion, the uprising, that, after 7 months, there were a lot of ups and downs, but there was like a period there where things were getting very, very grim. When an occupying force is losing its grip and it's not getting like public buy-in anymore, it doubles down. It's called the extinction burst in psychology. It doubles down on its very violent behavior. And so like when you watch that, especially when they were when they took over El Shifa Hospital, I think a lot of people lost hope. People were just like, okay, what the heck? Like, what's the point? But seeing the encampments and the student protests just emboldened and reawakened the movement again, Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And so sometimes I think with Taurus energy, which is what I'm really trying to embody as well, is sometimes you just have to do it. Like you have to make your body do something to prove to yourself to believe it. It's like the opposite of what they say, right? So something about the sun in Taurus conjunct Uranus in Taurus, and then Mercury moving into new territory, and then Venus in its home sign of Taurus sextile Saturn, I don't know, something about it feels very like refreshing and just like, okay, even though I don't necessarily believe this is going to happen for me personally, I just need to start taking. I'm thinking of like the Knight of Pentacles, which is like the slowest moving knight, but I'm going to take a step anyway because that's the only way things are going to change. Because Taurus is like the slowest sign. It's literally fixed earth. So how can I start moving the needle a little bit by my embodiment and by my body? So on May 17th, Mercury at 2 degrees of Taurus will square Pluto, which is now retrograde in Aquarius. Remember back in February as well. So we had three conjunctions in February. We had Mercury conjunct Aquarius. Excuse me. We had Mercury and Pluto conjunct in Aquarius at 0 degrees at the beginning of February. Then February 17th was Venus and Pluto in Aquarius at 0 degrees. At some point, there was Mars and Pluto conjunct at 0 degrees of Pluto, I mean, Aquarius. And so now they're all going to square Pluto. Like, so the story is continuing with the square, and squares are activation points. They're 90-degree angles where you have to integrate. Okay. And they're not always easy because you're going to come up against a wall. But that's when I believe squares are actually very powerful transits because there is no way for you to go forward. You have to either like, you can't like disassociate or bypass because it's going to keep coming back at you. What you resist persists, they say. So just think back to February when they came together at 0 degrees and now they're squaring, but this time Pluto is retrograde. Mercury in Taurus square Pluto in Aquarius. So some kind of maybe because Mercury is about communication. Mercury is the only god. It's Hermes and Hades in Greek mythology, where Hermes was permitted into the underworld to help the dead transition. So when this comes up astrologically, it's like something that was hidden might come up to the surface for you to see, some like secret information. And just at the mundane level, maybe this is like, secret money that somebody like stole or whatever, secret documents coming out, somebody's exposed during this time. But then in your own personal life, maybe you're privy to some secret information that, again, like Mercury is moving into new territory in Taurus. So it's like, oh my God, I didn't know that before. Just some ideas. Remember that these are archetypal energies and they like you can't fully predict how they're going to show up, but I'm just giving you some ideas and examples based on the significations of these signs and planets and their interactions with each other. Okay, so on May 18th, Venus and Taurus will conjunct Uranus and Taurus at 23 degrees. And at the same time, the sun will conjunct Jupiter. Okay, this is like, hello. Remember when I said the sun was conjunct Uranus on the 13th? So, like 4 days later, Venus will also conjunct Uranus. So, again, Uranus is the planet of awakening, of rebellion, of something happening possibly suddenly. And the sun was there possibly to bring some light onto a certain situation. And, this also happened first to Jupiter on April 20th, then the sun. Now Venus is there. You could, I don't know, have some surprise money come up, show up, especially if you're an Aries rising and you have Taurus in your second house, I'm just thinking, or if you're a Capricorn rising and you have Taurus in your fifth house and you win the lottery, and just like certain significations based on your rising sign. But I like this day. It seems very expansive and abundant. The sun in Taurus with Jupiter, that's also like expansion of your Taurus house. It's very, very cute. And so this like middle of May, um, like the second, third week of May, there's like a stellium of planets in Taurus. So you have Jupiter, Uranus, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury, 5 planets in Taurus. So your Taurus house is like being pinged. Bing, 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 bing. Okay. Um, which kind of goes back to, when was it? February, when there were all those, when there was a stellium of planets in Aquarius, and then February to March was that stellium of planets in Pisces and those conjunctions, and then in April, all of those planets in Aries, and it's like little by little we're renovating certain areas of your life. Okay. So then on May 19th, Mars in Aries will conjunct the North Node in Aries at 14 degrees. So the ruler of the North Node is Mars, because Mars, again, is the ruler of Aries. So this is okay. So at a personal level, just look at wherever you have Aries, because the North Node is transiting that area of your life, and it's trying to get you to um really pay attention and like integrate the lessons, and almost like your soul is trying to understand the archetype of Aries, which is I am, it's the warrior. It's like understanding yourself at a very individual level. Like, what is it that you desire? Mars, right? Mars is the planet of desire. And so when Mars connects with the North Node, this could be a huge activation point of like, this is what I desire, and this is how I'm going to do it. Mars is like the planet of action and severing. So some people can let go of people, friendships, relationships, and maybe a job. They're letting go of something because it's not serving them anymore. Mars and the North Node is a destined point. It's like a fated point, right? This is where the eclipses happen. So just pay attention on May 19th, because it goes exact, like what happens in your life or what are you thinking about, and look at where you have 14 degrees of Aries in your chart. Okay, I'm just interested in what that means for me, because I have Mars at 14 degrees of Libra. So it's like I have a Mars opposition on the nodes of fate. I'm just like very curious as to what that means. I think I'm going to continue to let go of friendships and relationships, even though I've been literally doing that since October. Okay, so May 20th is when there's a vibe shift. The sun will ingress into the sign of Gemini, and then we're entering Gemini season. And what's really sweet is like, well, depending on where you have Gemini in your personal chart, right? We're going to have trines to Pluto now. So right away on May 22nd, the sun in Gemini will trine Pluto retrograde at 2 degrees of Aquarius. Trines are the most flowing, harmonious aspects in astrology. They're 120 degrees. There really is nothing you do with trines except like enjoy the flowiness of trines. This is really good for communication. This is really good for networking, especially with I guess like powerful networks, because Pluto in Aquarius is about powerful networks. Yeah, this is just a really cute day. On May 23rd, we have a very, very cute full moon. So let me pull that up. Okay, here we go. So this is like my favorite full moon. It's so like lovely. We have the sun here at 2 degrees of Gemini, and then we have the moon here at 2 degrees of Sagittarius. That's what makes a full moon. It's when the sun is opposite the moon. And Okay, so we always want to look at the ruler of the moon. And the ruler of the moon here in Sagittarius is Jupiter. Jupiter is at 29 degrees of Taurus at the anaretic degree. And look at what is next to Jupiter. Venus. Venus in its home sign of Taurus. There's a Jupiter and Uranus and Jupiter Venus conjunction at 29 degrees. And actually, even though they're not in the same sign, you would consider this a conjunction because it is a very it's a 3-degree orb. It's very close. So there's Jupiter, Venus, and the sun here um together. Like that is so adorable. So full moons are all about completions and seeing something very clearly, having clarity. Sagittarius, I'm a Sag rising. So Sagittarius is about optimism, your belief systems, spirituality, philosophy, traveling. So just think back to the new moon in Sagittarius, which would have happened in like November or December of 2023, and just think about the things that the intentions you set at that time, and you might be able to see like a culmination of energy or a manifestation of that energy now, and I actually have to look in my journal of what I wrote during that time. um but something is coming to fruition, especially the fact that you have Jupiter and Venus and Taurus together at the anaretic degree. Something wants to come out, something wants to be manifested here. And another thing that I find so cute about this is Jupiter and Venus at 29 degrees are sextile to Neptune at 29 degrees, also at the anaretic degree of Pisces. So sextiles are also flowing. They're it's a harmonious aspect. So Neptune in Pisces is all about like Neptune is a collective planet like Uranus and Pluto. So Neptune in Pisces is like the collective vision, the collective dream, spirituality, and like unity consciousness, right? And something about this is very hopeful. Something about this is very like optimistic. And I don't know, maybe by May 23rd, maybe we'll have a permanent ceasefire. Fingers crossed. Um, Something happens or something comes to fruition that is bringing not only our individual lives some kind of optimism, but the collective as well. So let me see if I wrote anything down. And then yeah, after like right after this full moon, Venus will move into the sign of Gemini. So yeah. So right after this, Venus will move into the sign of Gemini. On May 25th, a couple days later, Jupiter will enter the sign of Gemini. And then we're going to talk about this for June forecast. But then we have this massive stellium of planets in Gemini, like in the beginning of June. So something about Taurus season is like getting ourselves grounded and embodied in our bodies, and prepared for something big happening in I don't know, I just feel like maybe I'm projecting because I'm just an optimistic person, but something big is happening for all of us between the end of May and the beginning of June. Something is coming to fruition finally, when maybe we thought like something was dead or something wasn't working out. We're going to get more clarity as time progresses. So like I mentioned, one of the biggest transits to happen in May is Jupiter moving into the sign of Gemini, and then Venus in Gemini will trine Pluto retrograde in at 1 degree of Aquarius. So remember back at the beginning of the month when Venus in Taurus was square to Pluto in Aquarius at 2 degrees. Now they're trine, but Venus is in a different sign. Venus is in Gemini and it's going to trine Pluto. So when you're thinking about like May 1st, when Venus squares Pluto, whatever integration happens at that time, something will be rebalanced and something will be harmonious at the end of the month when Venus and Pluto are trine. But it's interesting because like Pluto will be at 1 degrees versus 2 degrees. So just keep that in mind. Um, and then on May 31st, which is the last aspect, Mercury in Taurus will conjunct Uranus in Taurus at 24 degrees. This is like watch your nervous system kind of day because Mercury is a very busy energy, and so is Uranus. Uranus controls our electrical system. I have Uranus on my ascendant. Ha ha ha. Um, so you just want to like ground yourself. I mean, it's these two planets are in the sign of Taurus. So like that's what it's calling for anyway, is to ground your energy. But just like I mentioned at the beginning, we have the first Jupiter conjunct Uranus, April 20th, then the Sun, then Venus, and now Mercury is going to conjunct Uranus. So something again is trying to be awakened, trying to be broken apart or breaking free of your Taurus house to start a new chapter. So that was the last aspect. I'm really excited for May personally. I think I'm going to use this time to sit with myself and ask myself, um, who do I want to become? What do I desire? Especially with Mars connecting with the North Node. Um, what do I want to do with my very limited time here on Earth? Because I'm middle aged. Um, and yeah, who do I want to spend my time with and how do I want to invest my energy? These are all questions you can ask yourself too. And make sure to journal, like I said, like anything, even if you don't think it means anything, like just write it down. And this is how I use astrology is I go through each day and I journal and I see how each of these transits um are trying to help me become more of myself, really. I don't believe these planets are punishing me. I don't believe that and sometimes like nothing happens and that's okay too. But we are living in such a awakening time of change and revolution that it's just, I don't know, it's scary and exciting at the same time. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your energy and time. And I will see you next month for the big month of June. Bye.